This was a caller named Greg on the Art Bell Ghost to Ghost show, recorded in 1998. My wife's mother had died back in February 13th of this year. Prior to her death, my wife and children and I stayed with her in that house on many occasions. It was just a normal home, nothing strange. I was very comfortable there, had no problems whatsoever. The house at the time of her death went into probate, and of course my wife and her siblings were not wanting to leave the house empty because of vandals and that sort of thing. My wife and our 2 daughters and our unborn son moved into that empty house of March 1st of this year. Shortly after my family and I took occupancy of the home is when certain events started to take place. Just to paraphrase at this time, on around March 10th, we adopted a German Shepherd Beagle mix. That made my wife feel a lot better, of course, because I worked late at night, sometimes till 3 o'clock in the morning. It gave her peace of mind because the house was out in the country. Within those first 2 weeks that we took up residency in my wife's deceased mother's home, my wife would relate to me from time to time that she felt as though she was being watched intensely. I myself at the time, being a complete skeptic, dismissed the information as an overactive imagination, which I probably should not have. This was my belief until the evening of March 16th, 1998, when my eyes were widely opened. On that evening, I was having dinner with my wife and children, and my sister-in-law and her 2 teenage children were over to the house for dinner, just a few weeks after moving into the house. Everyone had left but my wife and I was sitting in a position at the dining room table that allowed me to look all the way down the hallway into one of the 3 bedrooms, which was my youngest daughter's at the time. At that point, I saw something that was so hard for me to describe. It was an aura of what seemed to be a woman's form, with a lot to me of what seemed to be energy around it. It definitely seemed to be the shape of a woman to me. I was so emotionless and locked into what was happening at the time that I almost lost relative consciousness of what or where I was, except for what was going on in that room. My wife was sitting over to the right of me and asked me what I had seen, and I described it to her, and she said something to the effect of, "You too?" The hair was standing up on the back of my neck, and I didn't know what to think. I just moved my wife and children into a house, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there. On around March 22nd, I was alone in the house, and my wife had left with her sister and my children to go visiting for the day. It was around the noon hour, and I was preparing to leave for work. I'd just come out of the restroom that adjoined our master bedroom. Bear in mind, our master bedroom used to be my deceased mother-in-law's bedroom. In a fairly quick instance, as I looked over my right shoulder, and I can see this as plainly as the day it was in my mind, in just a few seconds' time I saw my deceased mother-in-law leaning over the dresser area where her dresser used to be in her room, and it appeared as if she was leaning over to place something down. Shortly thereafter, things got interesting and strange phenomena began to occur. There was a beautiful plush-type white carpet in our home. There was no variance through any of the rooms whatsoever. One morning, I believe it was the end of March or 1st of April, my wife said, "Honey, come look at this." When you walked barefoot on the carpet, it would leave almost a type of imprint of your foot, and so we experimented a little bit. This was not my wife's footprint. It wasn't my footprint, and it was much too large to be either of my daughters. So we just stood there looking down, and my wife said, "I know it's my mother's." She lived with her mother till she married me when she was 19 years of age. She felt also, too, from that time on, that the constant set of eyes, or being watched, was all the more present. Our dog on many occasions would stand up and stare across the house into our bedroom, whining, staring. At night in my wife and I's bedroom, which of course was my deceased mother-in-law's, at times, my vision in the dark, I would lay awake at times, and it would start to blur. Eerie, if not demonic types of faces would, in the dark room come to me, very sharp. Then they would fade out slowly. I was reluctant to discuss this. The only reason I'm discussing it right now is that after we moved out and we're living where we are living now, I asked my wife if she had seen what I saw in the dark. I didn't want her to think I was nuts, so I asked her and she looked at me and said yes, she had too. The thing that bothered me about this was that it obviously was not my mother-in-law. Her appearance was not as foreboding as this particular situation, and that's when I started thinking, my God, is there a portal or something else here that followed her here? At that point, things were starting to happen at the end of summer. There were thumping noises on the wall. Many occasions at the noon hour, almost on certain days, frequently the phone would ring and there would never be anybody there. Everything stopped when we moved into our new home. I often wonder how the new owners are doing.